We're coming to you today from the third floor of the Rhode Island Capitol building, Smith Hill, Providence, Rhode Island, in a segment that we call Capitol Spotlight. We take about 5 minutes and talk to a member of the General Assembly about some of the issues that's important to them and its impact on you, the Rhode Island citizen. It gives me a good deal of pleasure to welcome back a gentleman who we've interviewed many times before. It's good to have him back, Representative Dan Reilly. Representative, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Dave. Thanks for having me on.
It's good to have you here, and I know there's something that is of grave interest to you regarding bridge tolls. Bring us up to speed on that and why you've taken on this issue.
Well, absolutely. It's a very important issue for my district, which represents parts of Portsmouth, Middletown, and Newport, the Aquidneck Island seat, and that is bridge tolls. This issue comes up every year as we have to deal with transportation funding in the state, and with the Newport River Bridge being completed within the next year, the area is under a lot of pressure, really, for bridge tolls on the new bridge, and this isn't anything new. We, of course, have the Pell Bridge that already has tolls, and the Turnpike and Bridge Authority, which also maintains and owns the Mount Hope Bridge, has talked about bringing tolls back on that span as well. And so now the Turnpike and Bridge Authority is actively pursuing not only raising the tolls on the Pell Bridge, which they're able to do by a simple vote of their board, but also reinstating the tolls on the Mount Hope Bridge, which were taken off over a decade ago. As a legislator, not only am I concerned about trying to keep that from happening, particularly with regard to expanding the tolls, but also I don't want to see tolls placed on the Newport River Bridge.
Well, now let me ask you this, not to get too inside baseball, but on the Mount Hope Bridge and the Newport River Bridge, is the money that is collected from Pell supposed to be enough to take care of those bridges too, or are those bridges just supposed to be maintained out of the General Assembly General Fund?
Well, the short answer to that question is no. What's been happening, however, since the tolls were taken off the Mount Hope Bridge, is that the tolls from the Pell Bridge have had to go support both the Pell Bridge in Newport as well as the Mount Hope Bridge. And that, as you can imagine, has produced quite a bit of strain on the Turnpike and Bridge Authority's budget. There's been no factoring in whatsoever of the impact of the new bridge because it's currently a DOT bridge being funded out of general revenue, actually out of federal highway funds. It was funded through Garvey bonds that were sold in anticipation of future federal revenue. What they're talking about tolls coming in on that bridge for is essentially to pay for the maintenance and debt service so that we can free up other federal monies and general revenue for other transportation needs across the state.
So people that live and commute each and every day over those bridges, they obviously don't want to take on this extra fee because tough economic times, people are watching to pinch every penny they can.
Right, absolutely. One thing that has been in a carrot and stick type approach the state has started talking about is perhaps putting tolls on the bridge but dedicating 100% of the revenue after the costs for the bridge are taken care of to transportation needs in the East Bay. And while I certainly would enjoy additional funds to help improve roads, that's going to come at a tremendous cost to our local area residents. To me, a good approach would be providing true state support for our bridges, which, by the way, when you include the Jamestown Bridge, these four structures represent over 70% of the bridge deck in the state's inventory. I think we need to see more state support in the form of general revenue sharing for those bridges so we can have the Turnpike and Bridge Authority and DOT maintain the structures with the funding in place on a more continuous basis.
Well, and you know what people say to that? Money's tight. There isn't money for that right now. It's got to come from somewhere, and that's going to be the argument that will be levied at you when you make that point.
Well, absolutely, and if the challenge is ever posed to me that where can you find $20 million as a member of the House Finance Committee, I'm always willing to meet that challenge, and certainly I could find you more than $20 million. But also I would have to point out that in Aquidneck Island, our transportation needs differ significantly than those from other parts of the state. And while we do have a commitment to maintain roads and bridges elsewhere, we have assets in the East Bay that just are unrivaled in other parts of the state and are going to require more support from the state.
Representative, I know you're not a betting person, but if you were, do you think it's inevitable that tolls will come to those bridges, or do you think you can fend that off?
Well, I think it's inevitable that we're going to have the debate, and I certainly think that's going to come this session sooner rather than later. The question is it going to be just tolls in the East Bay? Is the proposal going to be paired with tolls in South County? I certainly hope it does not prevail, but we certainly do expect to have the debate this session, and that's why we want to counter it with different other policy ideas that could perhaps fix the problems without having to require tolls.
Well, listen, one thing's for certain. Your constituents have zealous representation. I thank you so much for talking to us about this, and it is important to folks, and thank you for giving us some insight.
Thank you very much for having me, Dave.
And thanks to you for watching. My name is Dave Barber, coming to you from the third floor of the state capitol in something we call Capitol Spotlight.